gathered here today.
Hello.
I just wanted to briefly talk about the things that make a tuner a good tuner. The difference between a hobbyist and somebody who does it professionally for a living. Over the years, I've found that I've tried to find shortcuts, tried to create processes, and just any way that we can do anything that we can do to get to the next level quicker. And there's just no replacement for having the right people. So having the right people on the team has been probably the biggest eye-opener that, for lack of a better word, you can't make a fish climb a tree. You got to find the right person for the right job. And a tuner is a really unique skill set. So with you choosing to go back to school, I need to go out and cast a pretty wide net and try to find a tuner that has your level of obsession and your attention to detail. And I don't expect that to be an easy task. So we're kind of stepping the game up a little bit and going to try and identify what the traits are that have made you successful here. The last 4 years that you've been here have been a godsend, and I don't expect it to be easy to find a replacement. So tuning's such a large part of what we do here, and it's been a large part of what we've done for the last decade and a half, that I don't intend on letting the quality of the tunes that we send out the door decline. So hopefully you and I can discuss, and through that conversation maybe we can pique the interest of the right person to potentially join our team after you go back to school.
Cool.
So that's where I'm at. The thing that stood out to me with you came in as a customer and we tuned your car back before you decided to take it on full time.
Yeah.
And you had a turbo single cam, and we do a lot of turbo Hondas, and unfortunately a lot of times those cars are hodgepodge together, right? And yours stood out because it wasn't. You had like a notebook with engine modifications, chassis modifications, and transmission mods, and like all in this categorized format. And the car was, it's not fancy or anything, but it was very well put together, right? And so that stood out to me. That was just a sign of attention to detail. What do you think makes a good tuner?
I think first and foremost is you really, really have to like it. It has to interest you a lot. During that time when I brought my car over for tuning, I think this was 2018, something like that. Yeah. I had already been spending a significant amount of my time reading articles, going over the forums, and just gathering the basics. And I had already been actively tuning my car. But the key component that was missing for me is I didn't have a dyno, and I didn't know how to use a dyno. So that's why I brought my car here and had Kaizen Speed tune it. But yeah, I think if I had to pick the single most thing that will make a tuner successful is they genuinely have to like it, and it genuinely has to interest them. They have to enjoy spending their free time studying tuning cars, whether it's theirs, their friends, customers, anyone. If you're not already doing that on your free time, and and have the desire to do it nearly every waking moment, you're probably not the right guy for it. If you're just going to look at it as a job,
That's an interesting thing, because so many people outside of this industry don't understand that it just seeps into every minute of your life.
Yeah.
And if you don't enjoy it, then that just becomes miserable. Yeah.
That's how it's been for me. Even, started off with my own car. That as I felt that my skills improved, started working on my friends' cars, and it just grew from there till when you called me and offered a job. Then it just, there's really no replacement for experience. So you could be a hobbyist and tune your friends' cars, your own cars, but if until you do it every single day, You gather the experience of, you develop an ear, for when something's wrong or when things are right. When you're on the dyno, I could tell you right away if a car is misfiring or if it's not, or if something's wrong, and that's just from sheer experience of doing it every single day. So although I came in fairly inexperienced, I already had a database of information and in theory that I could fall behind when I wasn't sure about something.
Sure. How does that apply to remote tuning? So the difference between audibly hearing something and looking at data to try to, identify things. And specifically, like, it's pretty easy to see an oxygen sensor, acting funny. But with stock ECUs, sometimes the latency or the logging rate is slow. So maybe things don't show up if it's a minimal misfire. Okay. So I'm just curious, what do you think about tuning remotely versus the ear that you mentioned?
I have had great success using, if it's a vehicle with a narrow band and you have one narrow band per bank, I have had great success identifying misfires by looking at O2 sensor voltage. To me, it's very clear. It may not be to someone else. But when you're remote tuning, you really have to be, well, at least I am very selective with who I work with.
Yep.
I'm not going to work with someone who I believe won't have the ability or the diligence to point out when something is wrong and just go ahead and blame it on the tune, because there are two sides to tuning. You have the hardware, which is the car, the engine, spark plugs, and the software, and it's a marriage of both. So when you're remote tuning, you really have to rely on the customer to be your eyes, ears, nose, and that's just what it is. So when identifying a misfire, I have had great success using the data that I collect from a data log to determine where it's coming from. It's not always going to be the case, but it's always been something that I fall back on when trying to figure out if everything's okay.
Yeah.
Anything, you can even see imbalances in bank-to-bank imbalances using O2 sensor voltage. Now, it may not be the correct way. The correct way is to use a wideband, but not everyone's going to have a dual channel wideband on their car. So yeah, to answer your question, most of the time you can identify it.
I'm curious to see what you think about the difference between factory ECU tuning and standalone ECU tuning. So the majority of what we do on a day-to-day basis is factory ECUs, because the majority of customers are, in and out same day, as far as the smaller builds. The majority of what you've spent your time doing here is factory ECU tuning. Correct. Do you prefer one over the other?
I guess both have their pros and cons. It just depends on what it is. If you're going to bring me for example, 2018 Corvette Z06 with an automatic transmission, it's a no-brainer to use a factory ECM. We have proven the factory ECM to work in vehicles upwards of 1,000 horsepower and work great. Engines live. When you get to the point where you want really specific features like traction control, launch control, all those kinds of things, then it does make sense to install a aftermarket ECM like a Motec. But yeah, there's levels to this, right? If you want a sub 1,000 horsepower car, factory ECM is going to work great. If you want something beyond that, maybe it's time you can reconsider your options. So both work great. We can tune both. It just really depends on the customer.
So tell me about a day in the life of tuning here, and maybe how that's different from what you expected. Or is it any different than what you expected?
Yeah. So
tell me about a day in the life of tuning at Kaizen Speed.
You show up at 8:30 a.m. I show up in the morning, look at my schedule. I already have an idea. I have this schedule on my phone. So for any given week, I already have a rough idea of what I'm going to do. So I can properly prepare for that, whether that be building a base calibration or build a base file and have that ready. So when the car shows up, I can flash that into the car, test drive it really fast, put it on the dyno, do wide open throttle tuning, touch things up, and go from there.
And you're involved in the scheduling process as well. So, for the most part, or at least if there's a car that maybe has some question marks, you'll be involved in scheduling as far as asking that customer specific questions so that you don't show up and have too much of a hot mess
Correct.
on your hands, because we try pretty hard to not, throw you to the wolves as far as here's a car that's just needs a tune, but in fact now we can never completely eliminate that.
Correct.
But you are involved in the scheduling process, correct?
Yep. The just needs a tune thing was really, really common. My first year or two here, cars would show up and there would be a hodgepodge, it'd be a mess. And most of the time we couldn't even tune them that same day because techs are backed up and they can't get on that car and fix it immediately. So what we do now for scheduling is I work really closely with Nick, our service writer. He also does some of the scheduling. Prior to taking a deposit or even scheduling a tune, we send out something called a tune checklist. It's a pretty involved checklist detailing vehicle modifications, goals, power goals, and so on and so forth. So we review that prior to even taking a deposit. We determine whether it's a vehicle we want to tune or not, or we either recommend parts that they should change so that we could actually tune a vehicle. So that has been really helpful in allowing us to get cars in the same day and get them out the door the same day.
So we used that when you first came here. We had our second dyno, which was a roller dyno, all-wheel drive, and which meant we had tire-to-roller interface, which is fine for lower horsepower cars. But as the dyno wears and the knurling rolls off, it gets worse and worse and worse. Yep. And we used to joke about strap tuning as much as we would joke about tuning the vehicle, because we'd have to get out and adjust the straps because they would have to crawl up on that small roller just right to be able to hook. Yeah. And then we got rid of that, and now we've got the mainline Pro Hub. Yep. And how's that been compared to the old roller dyno?
Night and day. Before, with the old Dyno Dynamics, I would take all day trying to tune a car. We couldn't get a single repeatable pass. And once we were to the point where the tires got hot, it would just spin out. So it just became very frustrating. We couldn't finish tuning cars in a timely manner. It just sucked. You had to leave the straps loose, roll the car up onto the front roller to get it to hook. It was just sketchy overall. Yeah. It was terrible.
Definitely couldn't do transmission
yeah.
on that dyno.
Yeah, so now after we got the mainline Pro Hub, I feel that because it's a much better dyno, by nature our productivity increased, I think, by a lot.
And you felt more comfortable. Yeah. Less, because the other dyno had a pucker factor.
Yeah, it was much less stressful. On this dyno, you can bolt the car up, sit in the car, finish tuning it, and that's it. You don't have to worry about launching the car off the dyno, don't have to worry about getting out every other pull and putting track bite on the tires. You could focus on tuning the car and not tuning the dyno. I think it's been a game changer having this dyno here. Aside from that, prior to this dyno, we would have to go out on the street and really beat on the really high horsepower cars to verify that they will shift properly.
Which is both not safe.
Not safe.
And potentially you have to break laws to even get the car to shift at the RPM and mile per hour that we need to do. People are going to race them at. Now we're trying to do that on a street. Yeah.
So now we figured out how to do wide open throttle shifts on this dyno, and it's been great. So now we can build a car, tune both the engine and transmission, and feel comfortable that the customer is going to take the car to the track and the transmission is going to work and shift every time. The car is going to work great. It's been a game changer. I'm super happy with this dyno, and I know that although some guys are huge fans of their roller dynos. They suck. There's no comparison to the mainline Pro Hub dyno.
Yeah.
Not only that, but cars like your car with the Power Glide and a really loose converter, it's really hard to put those cars on a roller dyno. You could experience slip. I know we could have never done that on our old dyno. Yeah. So because the wheels on this because the wheels on the car on this dyno are directly coupled, you could easily dyno tune cars with TH400s, Power Glides, and all that, and not worry about a thing.
Yeah. So the question was posed: what would you look for in a tuning shop if you're gonna go work somewhere and be a professional tuner? What would be the difference between that being a good experience and a bad experience? And the thing that I said was not tuning shitty cars.
Yep.
Because when you're tuning cars that are a mess, both put together wrong, so they're leaking, they have mechanical problems, but also even if they're put together right, but they have the wrong combination of parts, such that the expectation from the customer can't match what can be achieved. So my answer to what's the difference between a good experience tuning and a bad experience tuning is tuning quality vehicles. What do you do you agree with that, or can you add on to that? What's the difference between a good experience tuning and a bad one?
That's definitely a key piece to the puzzle, having the car built right. Another one is the customer itself. Yeah. If you're working with a Karen, the car can be the most perfect car in the world, but if the customer is not right, if we can't mesh, it doesn't work.
Agreed. I think you really opened my eyes to that. You and Nick both have done a great job of just when it's not a good fit, the earlier that you can cut ties with that customer, the better. Yeah. Because we're never going to be on the same page, and if we can't work well together, we're not going to have a good result.
Yeah.
So instead of fighting for that opportunity to tune your vehicle, it's better to just leave. Yep. Yeah. Agreed.
It's important. Yeah. So Nick and I are kind of opposites with that. Nick is nice. I'm not saying that I'm an asshole, but I'm less nice. So I have less tolerance for shit like that. So I think it's important that you have multiple members on your team that are different.
Yeah.
Because Nick can give me a point of view that I didn't have. Then I'd say, okay, I'm being an asshole. I need to.
And sometimes he's right and sometimes you're right. Yeah. And I think that's you're right on point with that, as far as the team is what makes the end result successful.
Yeah.
And that's the point I was trying to get to when we first were talking, is I've tried to find improved processes and other potential shortcuts or ways to get to the end result. And there's just no replacement for the right people on your team that work well together. Mm-hmm. I mean, the best analogy is a football team. You can't take people that aren't good and coach them such that they're a quality NFL team. You have to start with people who are who have the skills and then work well together. So building the team is probably the most important thing to me this many years in, and realizing that I can't make a square peg fit a round hole. You just have to find the right person for the right position, and then miraculously everything just seems to work.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking for now, is, with you going back to school and going back to do your electrical engineering thing, we need to find somebody that has your skill set and meshes with the guys the way that we've meshed over these last few years. So I hope that we can find that.
Yeah, I guess if you don't have it, you don't have it. And if you do, then I don't know how long it took for you to know that I was going to work well here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if someone's not already actively tuning cars, researching, and trying to improve on that skill, I don't think it's something that could happen overnight, or over a year or 5 years even. Prior to me working here, I had already been wrenching, studying. It's just, yeah.
It was a bit of an obsession as far as a significant interest.
Yeah, if you're not already significantly interested in this, it's not going to work.
Yep.
I think you could agree with that, but I'm sure there are outliers, but that has been my experience.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So we're looking for Dan's replacement. So if you think you can do what Dan can do, Dan says he can. Do you say can or can't?
You can't.
Can't. There you go. The challenge has been
I challenge
offered
you.
up.
I challenge you.
If you think you can do what Dan can do, as good or better, I sure would encourage you to contact me, and I'd like to start a conversation.
And I will personally come and bow down to you if you match me.
That's about all I got, guys.
Yeah, that's perfect.